Morning, and it's an early morning, Thursday morning, 6 a.m. I'm Kevin McPherson. This is HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Only chance I could get one of these done today. It's going to be another busy day. I will be out of town, and so trying to get stuff handled on after missing yesterday. We had a couple of two recent segments that we really kind of broke down the start. What the roster looks like when you look at it positionally, kind of compartmentalize that with backcourt and front court. Really haven't brought much in the way of intel or updates on some things. We have been efforting that though. And the last time I was on, I even kind of teased that I was, trying to drill down on some stuff that was going on enough to maybe jump even, break in and come back in, with some intel nuggets. It's just taken me an extra day, so we didn't do one yesterday. I wanted to kind of get as much as I could here, especially with the fact that Arkansas, some stuff came out yesterday about Arkansas's high school recruiting. So we're gonna go into some of that, but we're also going to jump into the portal because that's where things have really been slow since I guess it was Monday before last. So I think you have to go back to April 21st when the staff kind of bristled at the notion that Arkansas was pursuing Chad Baker-Mazara. That came out via a national reporter. And since that time, including my conversation with the staff, radio silence in terms of, no, we may be just fine where we're at. Then I got source information a few days later, and I came on to one of these segments and reported that a staff members indicated to someone they're at least looking to add one more. We know things can change. Do they talk themselves into shutting it down truly? Are they going to add just one more? Might they add even as many as two more? I could see a path for more than one add if they do that. But it's gotten really quiet, especially in terms of, well, what direction do they go if they decide to add one more? Would it be a big name in a feature kind of player? Would it be just a depth piece? I mean, there's more than one way to do it. But one of those splash kind of players, one we've talked about a lot, Jamir Watkins, is who we're going to talk about with a little intel nugget this morning. So there's not a lot of context around this in terms of, a real plan for what he's going to do. As far as I know, right now, Jamir Watkins, the 6'7" wing, I guess you could call him a jumbo wing out of Florida State, that's in the transfer portal, but also in the NBA draft process. From what I still understand, he's still committed to the draft process as of now. So I don't have any new intel to say, well, he's leaning towards coming back. But what I have been told is that he's interested in Arkansas, and this is a very recent commentary, that he is interested in Arkansas among a short list of teams, maybe a handful at this point. If he were to come back, that's an if he were to come back to college. So maybe his draft process, May 28th is the deadline for all college eligible players to withdraw from the draft. That's the deadline if they want to go back and play college. And, we'll see if he gets a combine invite, if he gets a G League Elite Camp invite, what individual workouts and team stuff does he have lined up with the NBA. But if he were to come back, the intel is, and I didn't get any more context other than Arkansas is among a handful of teams. So I wasn't given who the other teams were. And I'm told, my source is telling me this is coming directly from someone in his camp, someone tied to or affiliated with or understanding of what his process is right now going through the NBA part of it. Other than, if he does come back, the news here is that he would be I was given air quotes. Absolutely, Arkansas would be a team he would be interested in. Now, I go back to the fact that Arkansas, from that standpoint, when I brought his name up the day that the CBM stuff was shut down, I brought him up and PJ Haggerty and was told no. Got a buzzer sounded, and then I clarified, well, what does that mean? That sounds negative. Does that mean no? And yeah, no. But that's, what is the staff supposed to say? If they want to work in darkness and do, this is something you're gonna have to wait on anyway because the NBA draft process, I can understand, not wanting to acknowledge something like that in that time, maybe later if it gets closer to something. So I don't have any more information on where Arkansas sits with that. I was always told that Arkansas was looking to add a significant piece. And it made sense because they were holding out for Nate Ament with the 10 guys they have, including Carter Knox, who we'll see. I still believe he'll be back and coming back, but Jamir Watkins makes a whole lot of sense. If he's not coming back, for sure. If you want to debate, well, what is that? Is that more is less based on the kind of roles you project for Carter Knox if you get him back, plus Trevor Brazile at the 4 spot, Watkins kind of that 3-4. But that's the kind of player where if you can get him and you're serious about it and you want him, you've got the NIL to do it, and you can figure that out and figure those minutes out. That's not to say that is what Arkansas is going to do. This is just one side of it. And it's one side of it talking about if they come back, not I am coming back. Nothing definitive on that, just that Arkansas would absolutely be a team he would have interest in if he does. So take that for what it's worth. Again, I don't know what Arkansas's plans are. It very well may be that this is, there's only a few difference makers still out there, and most of those are in the NBA draft process. And Watkins is the one that probably makes the most sense for Arkansas in terms of, that 4 spot depth, because he can be a 3-4. He can be on the floor as you call him a jumbo wing with another wing and a couple of guards. There's more than one way you could use him. And teammates with Malik Ewan at Florida State don't know the dynamic there, familiarity with Arkansas and even the campus, because he, this time last year, or excuse me, I guess it was 2 years ago, 2 recruiting cycles ago, he came and visited with Khalif Battle. So there it is on Jamir Watkins. We'll see where that goes. Thanks again for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. We're 7 minutes in. That's it. There's nothing more to say there other than this is a guy that, could potentially, he was all ACC second team last year, a volume scorer, a volume shooter, decent 3-point shooter, not great. Could he improve there? Sure, why not? But historically, when you look at his career, that's not something you necessarily look at and say, okay, he's going to move the needle there. That's an area that Arkansas could use to get better. So if you're looking at only adding one more, let's say it's him, that doesn't necessarily help you there, but it helps you in a ton of other ways that make sense. So moving on now, I hope I don't know how useful it is, because I wish I knew that Arkansas, I wish I could, and I really worked on trying to figure out, because it's not going to come from Arkansas right now. Someone else is Arkansas after this guy. And I just couldn't get more on that outside that coaching staff in terms of, how deep are they into it with this guy? Because the last word I got directly from them was, So, for what it's worth category there, because there's not much more context other than his side of it. All right, moving on to item 2. This is one in-state kid I'm asked about all the time. I think it was last week. It was either on one of these segments. It might have been one of my Drive Time Sports radio segments. I can't remember that I do so many of these. It's kind of all running together. But I did bring up his name as one of those others that you might add beyond the top rotation guys. But I didn't think he would be interested in coming to a situation where he wouldn't have a role, a planned role for him to play, something planned for him in year one to be part of a rotation. So that was my last commentary on that. Now, it's been out for about a week or two, maybe 10 days or so, that Arkansas has been kicking the tires on the idea and having conversation with him and his family about coming to Arkansas in such a role of, maybe a developmental piece, maybe with a plan to redshirt, something like that. I don't know that those details have been ironed out if that were to happen, but I do know those conversations have been on the table, been able to confirm that. So there has been some back and forth there. And we know that the way Calipari did it in year one outside his top 9 rotation, he brought in guys that were effectively walk-ons in terms of they weren't going to play maybe at the end of a blowout, something like that. And we saw that's exactly how it played out. But most of them were technically on scholarship. They were actually on an academic scholarship.
And I even found out later that everybody got, even if it wasn't a lot, got NIL money. So is that something that would be okay with Terion Burgess and his family? I think that's the thing that's going on right now in terms of making a decision. Now, um, so Burgess, just to remind anyone that doesn't know, most of you know this, out of Benton, brought the school its first basketball state title ever in the 5A, and it was in the 5A this year. And Burgess hits the game winner. But furious comeback at the end. Benton beats Maumelle for the 5A state title. He was Max Prep's Arkansas Player of the Year this last season. He was the 5A South Conference Player of the Year. 6'9" combo forward. He's been rated as highly as top 35 in the country by 247 Sports. He was injury plagued, and that in combination with some skill stuff that he continued to work on, but battling through injuries in the last year. When you look at some of the spring and summer stuff, took part in the Adidas All American Camp last summer. He also took part in Adidas Euro Camp. And some of that stuff he missed some of the playing opportunities and some of that, and then in some of the ones he did, maybe didn't perform as well as he would have liked. But he's still a 4-star prospect. Rival still has him ranked in the top 100. He's the 81st ranked prospect, but he's got multiple teams recruiting him, mid-major and a few high major. But once upon a time, Alabama, they had a coach courtside for everything he was doing. Same with Oklahoma. Porter Moser making trips down. Ole Miss, Wes Flanagan with the Arkansas ties. He's kind of hung in there with Terion. Ole Miss is the one that's in the SEC that's really hung on with him. The previous coaching staff at Arkansas, Eric Patrick Mulsman, they were, in a sense, prioritizing Burgess, but 6'9" combo forward. And again, now as a state champion out of Benton, that's the last we've seen of him. But there seems to be some real traction here with Arkansas. And I could tell you a few things. There'll be some intel nuggets here. Only one part is I've already given you. I have confirmed that there actually is some progress toward talks between the Razorbacks and Burgess and his family in terms of what it would look like if he came to Arkansas. I know that he had several upcoming midweek meetings via his family with some other teams. So if that's the case, and I have no reason to believe it's not, that means that this is not a resolved situation. Or if it is resolved, maybe they're just, were already obligated or had promised to do some of these meetings before they made an official announcement, and they're just going to go through that. Either way, they had some several, not just one, but several meetings with other college teams. Those were at least through yesterday, to maybe take place. So, if this is a situation where he's making a decision or has made a decision and it's Arkansas, it will be one of those, back in kind of a development. Does it lead to a red shirt? That part I can't speak to, but it would not be a targeted role for a top 2 rotation. That's my understanding. Now, teams like Little Rock, Wichita State, I mentioned Ole Miss, San Diego State. There are some other schools that have been recruiting him and that have a role for him, that have NIL money for him, a role in year one beyond development, and let's see what happens later on. And so those are the kind of decisions you're making right now in his camp. If you do, if Arkansas becomes a serious option for him. I did my due diligence on the back end. I checked to see if there had been any paperwork. I did this yesterday, process like we do with players we hear might be, maybe Arkansas bound. And as of yesterday, Wednesday, no paperwork had been done for Terion Burgess at Arkansas. So I'm considering that. Doesn't mean that it's not in process and there's a chance for that to go through or it to happen. But as of yesterday, that was not something that had happened. Billy Bano, the former UNLV head coach. So he's been a Division I head coach, a former NBA assistant coach, has been working over the past year, maybe 18 months, training and mentoring, consulting the Burgess family, but training and mentoring Terion Burgess.
And he's got a relationship with John Calipari. So I don't know. He's friends with John, Billy Bano. He's been around a long time. So I don't know what dynamic is going on there in terms of, maybe being involved in this. I can't speak to it either way. Good morning. So we'll just see about Terion Burgess and if that's something that's going to happen. Now, I was also told that a decision could be made by Friday, which is tomorrow. What, today's May 1st? April showers bring May commitments. I don't know, but May 2nd, maybe as soon as tomorrow, maybe next week. But here's what we know. Like Arkansas, most schools, they're bringing in their team for next year. They're recruited players, they're add-ons onto campus, usually around Memorial Day weekend, because of summer sessions that get started up, getting ready, getting physicals, getting ready for those limited practices that begin in earnest and run June through July, the first part of June. So a decision's coming. It's just really how soon is it, and is it going to be Arkansas? So, look, some of the schools that are recruiting him are reaching out to me about this, asking me what I know about it. That's been going on for over a week. We're hearing this. We're hearing maybe this is happening. So it's not. If it was supposed to be a well-kept secret, I guess it wasn't. And again, I haven't said much other than last week I did when it came up or when I brought it up. I don't remember how it was framed, other than I did say I would be surprised if he would be okay with that. That kind of a role or a non-role, and it's just a developmental piece. But what makes sense about it is, because I know his family loves the Razorbacks. They are Razorback fans. That's true. And, they were, I remember reporting forever that Arkansas was, in great shape with him, with Eric Patrick Musman, when they were recruiting him, and felt like it was always going to lead to Arkansas under that scenario. Well, a lot has changed in the last year. We mentioned Burgess and his struggles with injuries, maybe impairing some of his development or being able to show development in some of these settings that matter, but but also Arkansas's coaching change. So this is always going to come down to what does the feel good in terms of his taking the next step, and who's to say it's a good idea to come to Arkansas, be in the kind of learning role, get stronger, get that coaching, and see where it goes from there. But I would say outside of developmental situation, maybe even as a red shirt, he would be an emergency kind of a situation in terms of what he see the floor for any meaningful minutes in year one, if he were to do that. All right, so we're going to keep our eyes on that. I mean, again, if a decision's made and it's made by as soon as Friday, that means that's one of the things I was told it could happen by tomorrow, maybe next week, and then we'll see what that is. And if we learn any more about this, that adds to it or changes it, we'll come back and share that. All right, I'm going to move on to item number 3. Speaking of completing or filling out this current roster for the 25-26 season, year 2 under John Calipari, we already talked about the intel a few segments ago about Mika Murnin, how the notion is it's kind of heating up that he may reclass. He might be looking for a good enough NIL deal to motivate him to do that. I've always wondered if he did reclass, because it's something that's been a talking point going back almost a year now, and he visited Arkansas last fall in late September. And remember, Murnin, 6'10" combo forward, Arizona Compass Prep from Finland, a top 5 rated 5-star in the 2026 class. Remember, we always, at some point, we were talking about if he did reclass, there was this talk that maybe Utah would be the team that would be most willing, and this is a while back, the most willing to step up and make him a priority, whereas other schools might entertain the idea, but maybe not as a priority, hence NIL offer not as much, a promise of some kind of role as a freshman not as much. And Arkansas has always been kind of lumped in there, although we've also said, which is true, Calipari it's in his wheelhouse to go after players and promote the idea of a reclass if he thinks it's the right thing to do. So there's a lot of stuff there with Mika Murnin, but just an update, speaking with someone yesterday, tracking down the non-spring and summer participation, which we've also talked about with Murnin, and the fact that he wasn't with Brad Bill Elite or any other team
in session one last week on the Nike EYBL circuit. But, and Tyron Stokes shutting down and just going to do workouts. Also, the number one rated player in 2026. Sounds like maybe he's going to stick to 2026. We'll see. But Brandon McCoy Jr., a point guard out of St. John's Bosco High School in Los Angeles, Calipari has been recruiting him. And he's the second rated player in that class of 2026. So obviously a 5-star. But there's also some idea that maybe he's shutting it down and not going to do spring and summer. But just talking with one of these recruiting analysts on the national level yesterday, they said out of those three, Muirnan, McCoy, and Stokes, right now it still seems like Muirnan might be the most likely to try to reclass. So we're keeping an eye on it. It's just a little bit of update there. It's kind of tracking what we thought there, just throwing Brandon McCoy Jr.'s name in there. I think that's interesting on some of the guys opting to not go through spring and summer when this is their last opportunity to do it. And so a lot of times that they're either, when you see that, usually it means a commitment may be forthcoming. Maybe they'll reclass and a commitment's forthcoming, that kind of thing. But we'll just keep an eye on this dynamic for now. Maybe some of these players are seeing another path in their development. Maybe they don't feel like they have to prove anything else to get to the school they want to get to, and save themselves all that spring and summer travel. But you also can miss out on some stuff with that. So it's an interesting way to do it. Moving right along, we've talked so much about J.J. Andrews. We're exactly 2 weeks away. It'll be a Thursday, May 15th. Today's May 1st, so 2 weeks. J.J. Andrews, 6'6", ESPN ranks him the 22nd best player in the country. He makes his commitment announcement. It's down to, obviously, Arkansas as a reminder, LSU, Mizzou. And so I've been saying on here the same thing consistently. I had someone reach out to me and said that they saw somewhere where it was attributed to me that I said Arkansas is the clear leader. Arkansas is going to get him. What I have said is if NIL and whatever promises are being made with NIL and role and opportunity as a true freshman, if those things are close or equal, Arkansas is the clear leader because he'd be a legacy. He's an in-state kid, those things. But it's always been with the caveat of, and have not successfully been able to find out what are the promises that have been made to him by teams like LSU, who's spending a lot more and a lot more serious about its basketball lately in NIL. And of course, Missouri, who, landed Arkansas' arguably top player from the class of 2024, Keanu Boateng. Dennis Gates has really recruited the state of Arkansas hard, and he has made a priority out of J.J. Andrews, as has LSU. Arkansas feels like it has. I know the staff believes that it has. So we'll see. So everything favors Arkansas if they're not behind in what they're willing to do with NIL and some kind of role. And those things are always tied together, right? You're gonna pay more of a premium for players that you're counting on to come in day one and be part of your main rotation stuff, and really factor in with a big impact role. And so those things will help guide this. Now, his decision on May 15th will be at Little Rock Christian Academy. That's where he's played, won 2 state titles while there, and including getting a state title MVP a couple of years ago when the Warriors were in 4A. Usually when an in-state kid in Arkansas does a public announcement, like that, and has a ceremony, usually if Arkansas's in the mix, Arkansas's the choice, right? It's usually that way, but it's not always that way. I mean, you don't have to go back really that far back. Class of 2020, Chris Moore, Eric Patrick Melsman, he was one of those 5 in-state guys that were ranked in the top 100 and 4-star players. It was Moses Moody, Jalen Williams, Devo Davis, KK Robinson. It was also Chris Moore. And Chris Moore had a very public commitment ceremony and chose Auburn. And so, so there is obviously precedent. That's not the only one. But that doesn't mean that the hat that he's going to pick up in front of a crowd is guaranteed to be Arkansas. But again, just to reemphasize, I do think Arkansas, his dad was a All-American lineman with the Razorbacks. Again, in-state kid. Calipari's the best in recruiting. He's the best at developing guys for the next level. All this stuff
proven track record type of thing, right? There's every indication is Arkansas is way above and beyond programs like LSU and Missouri when you look at it from that standpoint. But writing checks, NIL money, and then that's going to be tied to what you're promising to deliver in terms of a role and what it looks like there. Those are things that could upset the apple cart if Arkansas is far enough off what an LSU or Mizzou might be willing to offer. So there we go. All right, 26 minutes in. Let's move down the line here. Arkansas associate head coach Chin Coleman. It was reported that Arkansas would send an assistant coach out yesterday to Archbishop Stepinac High School in West Plains, New York, about 15 miles north of New York City proper, outside the 5 boroughs. It's one of, I think, 4 Catholic schools that are technically not in the 4 boroughs that are part of the New York City Private School League. But Arkansas and a ton of other schools had gone out this week while they could. Yesterday, the 30th, was the cutoff date for the recruiting period. It was the end of it. We have entered, as of today, what's called a quiet period. Players can still visit campuses. They can go and take their visits. May 1st through June 30th now is this quiet period. There's like a day or two in there that'll be a dead period. There's also some live eval stuff in there for college coaches to go out. The NBA G League, the G League Elite Camp, the Combine, and then mid-May, there's the first live eval period for coaches to go out and watch high school players. So there are some exceptions, and then there'll be some more of those live eval setups in June, but coaches can't go on to players' campuses during this quiet period and go see them. So yesterday was the last day to do that. So it was Arkansas and a bunch of other teams this week that went out to Archbishop Stepinac, in particular, 2 top 75 rated twins in the 2026 class, 6'11", 7-footers, basketball family. There's Arkansas ties there. But I was able to confirm it was associate head coach Chin Coleman, who went out to see the Ratliff twins, Darius and Adonis. And they're both, again, depends on what service you look at. I talked to the high school head coach, Patrick Massaroni, who was generous enough to spend some time with me on the phone yesterday after they finished up. And a lot of schools were out there, Arkansas among them. A couple of SEC teams, Texas and Alabama, recently both offered the twins. And Coach Mass told me yesterday that even though Coleman was there and expressed, that Arkansas is really excited about these 2 players, that an offer, he said Arkansas and Michigan were the 2 teams that didn't put out offers, but he felt like Calipari would be on the phone with both of these young men as soon as the next couple of days, but he felt like maybe even if it takes a couple of weeks that Calipari would get on the phone, and he thinks Arkansas is going to offer scholarships to Darius and Adonis Ratliff. Again, these are both players listed anywhere from 6'11", 7 foot. Both of them listed just under 200 pounds. They're thin guys right now, 195, 190 pounds. They've got some guard skill. I've been, watching their highlights, things I've read about them, and the coach, used that word as well, some guard skill in our conversation yesterday. And shout out to him also, by the way. He told me when he called me, he said, yeah, listen, he goes, I follow you on Twitter. He goes, I really like your content. And he goes, I started following you because you were covering Boogie. That's where Boogie Fland attended high school. Was Mr. New York basketball. That's where Fland is. So there's player continuity for Arkansas there. They were happy with how things went with Fland. But it was also cool to hear that, someone, a coach out in New York was paying attention to the basketball content that I put out. But both of these guys, again, they've got a who's who of schools after them. They've already got some significant offers. The thought here is Arkansas will offer. Chin Coleman was out. And the basketball family in the Arkansas ties, Theo Ratliff is their dad. Theo Ratliff was 6'10", 6'11", first-round draft pick. I think it was either the late 90s or early 2000s. I know in 2001, Ratliff was an NBA All-Star. It was during the Allen Iverson era in Philadelphia, so some really good teams. And I believe that same year, not only was Allen Iverson obviously an All-Star, I think he was the league MVP.
So I think all that went down in 2001. But that's Theo Ratliff, big rim protector. Was an all defensive guy in the league 2 or 3 years. One of the league's top shot blockers. So this is coming from a basketball bloodline. For those that remember Theo Ratliff, he came out of Wyoming, out of college. But Yasmin Ratliff, one of the siblings, an older sister to Adonis and Darius, Yasmin Ratliff played with Arkansas women's basketball. She was on the team, about 8 or 9 years ago. I think I know she was on the roster during the 2016-17 season. So there's a tie there. Obviously, Calipari's got his roots embedded in the around the country when it comes to high school recruiting. And my understanding is the Ratliffs have a great amount of respect for Cal. So who knows where this goes? It looks like, based on what the head coach for the high school thinks, that these guys are going to get offers, maybe sooner rather than later, and that Calipari, it's a phone call away. So we'll keep tracking that. But I thought, just kind of looking into this, there's some things that are positive, and it's always positive when you're talking 7-foot or big man twins, right? I joke there because there's a mixed bag at times. But it's interesting. Why not get 2 for 1 if you can? Just a little nugget here. A source told me that Arkansas assistant coach Chuck Martin has reached out to class of 2026 composite national number 19 5-star Deron Rippey Jr. last week. He was at Blair Academy in New Jersey, a 6'2" guard. Again, composite top 20 5-star guard. And Arkansas assistant Chuck Martin reached out to he and his dad last week, and then we'll see if there's any traction there. Arkansas knows maintain contact with him. I don't know if they've been out to see him in the past year. I'm not sure that they have, and so we'll see where that goes. But that was just a little something extra here today that I was able to find out in the last couple of days. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping just real quick as we move through this. Kareem Abdul, we talked about the front line the last time I was on a couple of days ago. The Lebanese forward that's played in the Lithuania, that sort of that secondary pro league. I called it the B league, not the A league pro league in Lithuania, but the next one on the one rung down there. And one of the things I said when I was talking about the front court depth was, we now know that he's 6'7" and, not 6'9" like we thought. But that was based on a graphic that the University of Arkansas put out a few days ago. I kind of did a double take when I saw it. I'm like, okay, we've been wondering, what's his height? When we see 6'9" listed, you're always wondering what's legit. And I saw that 6'7", and so I was going off of that. Well, his agent, I was back in touch with him to get some more details yesterday, and keeping an eye on it. And the big thing was Wednesday, so April 30th, yesterday, he did get his student visa completed. So the last time we were on, we were talking about it was thought it would happen within the next week. But also his agent said, hey, by the way, I watch your content. And he goes, Kareem's not 6'7", he's 6'9". And I'm like, he goes, so where'd you get that from? I'm like, well, the university had put a graphic out announcing his signing, and they had him at 6'7". And he goes, yeah. He goes, the school informed him. He didn't see that graphic, but he was informed that they mistakenly got their height wrong. They reached out to him to tell him that they'd corrected it. So I went back to the Arkansas Razorback men's basketball Twitter account and found the new graphic. Sure enough, they did retweet it and corrected it back to 6'9". So he was aware of the mistake. I told him that's where I'd gotten it from. I didn't see the update or the correction, but we're going to correct the record. He said that he was measured without shoes at 6'8" plus, without shoes, and in shoes at one of these formal Euro whatever setups where they go and do those measurements, and that Artal measured 6'8" plus without shoes. So and in shoes he measured 6'9". So that we're back to that. So let's clear that up. I asked about his weight. I believe there's some places that report him at 207. His agent told me 205. So we got a little there. And without asking, he just said, he's really hungry in terms of coming over here to prove himself and to, forge, carve out some playing time. He'll be a freshman. Yes, he's a little older. He's 20. So we got to, just wanted to kind of do some tidying up there and clear that up a little bit on Kareem Abdul. So the last thing I wanted to do, this has been out a few days earlier in the week. Joe Lunardi, ESPN bracketologist, he's the one I always refer to, put out his first bracketology for the 2025-26 season. Arkansas, as expected, makes an appearance in the bracketology. Remember, there's several of the national college basketball analysts that have already put out their way too early rankings. Arkansas, when you start looking at guys like Jeff Goodman, John Rothstein, Jeff Berzello, had Arkansas in some order ranked 8th through 10th. There's some other polls that, are way too early polls that have Arkansas closer to 20th, but inside the top 20. But Lunardi has Arkansas as a projected 5 seed in his first bracketology offering for next season. Well, that's commensurate. That's, if you were looking at a 5 seed, that would be consistent with a team ranked anywhere from 17th to 20th, loosely making that comparison to a poll ranking. But he had 13 SEC teams in, which I thought was, we've said that maybe the SEC won't be as strong as it was last year, but it's still arguably going to be the best conference. Well, this is a blowout when you look at just how he projected the field. Again, it's way too early, but he's got 13 SEC teams. He's got the Big Ten with 12, so not a blowout over the Big Ten. The Big 12 with 8. He has projected the ACC with 5, so that would be an improvement for that league over last season, and the Big East with 4. But it would be a blowout for the SEC to have back-to-back seasons with that many teams and then being also the head of college basketball once again. This is just not something the league historically has enjoyed, that kind of that level of respect. So he's got Arkansas as a 5 seed, Kentucky, the highest seeded team he's got, and it's way too early to look at it, as a 2, Tennessee and Florida both as 3 seeds, Auburn as a 4, Mizzou and Bama as each as 6 seeds, Mississippi State as a 7, Texas 8, Vanderbilt 8, Oklahoma 9, Georgia 9, and he's got Ole Miss and Chris Beard as a play-in 11 seed. So that's the early look at it with those teams. Now the 3 teams left out, Texas A&M, he's got them in the first 4 out. So he's saying there's a chance, based on these way too early, for the SEC to once again get 14 teams in. We can laugh about it now, right? There's just a long way to go. Who knows how it shakes out, but it's getting close to being a mirror action of what we saw last year in terms of how many projected in. LSU and South Carolina, not on the bubble even, from what I could see on his projection. So that's cool. Another note of interest here, Southern Cal, Eric Patrick Melsman, projected as a 4 seed. You look at that recruiting that Eric Patrick Melsman's done out there, the EPM, what did they call it, a bus when he was in Arkansas? They still call it a bus out there. Whatever it is, it's revving up and about to pop a wheelie, it sounds like. Not a good year. He had back-to-back losing seasons as a high major coach, the last year at Arkansas, and then again last year in his first season at Southern Cal. But it looks like he's got a chance to have a really good season. And so we'll see where that goes. But a 4 seed projection for Southern Cal. One little other thing before I sign off here, we're under 40 minutes, is that there's some talk about Arkansas and Memphis potentially playing next season in a charity exhibition game. Not sure what that would be at Bud Walton Arena. Arkansas has hosted 2 high major teams in the past 2 seasons under 2 different coaching staffs in charity exhibitions. We know they were both wins over, Final Four projected teams. Purdue 2 years ago, Kansas last year. Penny Hardaway's been talking about wanting to get Arkansas on the schedule for years, in recent years. Calipari, with the former coach there at Memphis before he went to Kentucky, took that team to a Final Four and a championship game. So there's a lot of reasons where there'd be interest to do something like this. It's a regional, not a high major school, but effectively a high major. The American Athletic Conference, Memphis is the standard in what's arguably the top mid-major league out there. So there's some talk. I don't have anything to confirm that this is going to happen. Not sure if it's destined to happen, only that there's some talk of Arkansas and Memphis. And again, Arkansas, unlike last year where the Razorbacks knew they were going to have a road game in the SEC ACC Challenge, this season you'll have a home game. We know there's going to be a neutral site game, and Calipari's going to look to have some really you know, big stage one-off games on neutral sites. Next year, it's one of those is Duke. That'll be in Chicago. Again, Arkansas will host an ACC SEC opponent for that challenge. And the ACC opponent that I'd like to see would be either North Carolina or Louisville. Not sure that'll happen. But those are the ones I prefer. But the question becomes, does Arkansas schedule a true road game on its own? Because they didn't schedule one on their own. That was just part of the format with that challenge. The previous year, in the first year of that challenge, Arkansas hosted Duke to start that thing off and won that game. Then they went on the road to Miami, so it's their turn to host again. So they didn't schedule a road game in terms of what the staff did. Will they schedule a true road game in non-conference? And certainly will they look to do what they did last year? They didn't technically play on TCU's campus, I don't think, when they did that charity exhibition game last year in October, but they did play in Fort Worth, so it was effectively a road game. Will they look to add another charity exhibition road game and a regular season road game? I can't wait for some of the schedule news to drop because some of that stuff will start to play out, and we'll find out some of that stuff in the coming weeks. And we'll even probably learn, like we typically do, what the SEC matchups are before we even get the playing dates and all that. Some of that stuff will start to roll in even before we find out all the non-conference opponents. All right, nearly 42 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Appreciate everyone. The plan is right now, I'll be out of town for sure today. And then we'll see if I'm continue to be out of town through Sunday. It's looking that way with a lot of basketball in front of me, including some Arkansas recruits, some Razorback recruits in the high school ranks. Can't say a whole lot about that right now. I'm going to kind of save it for when I'm actually in the middle of it and doing some of that. And a lot of that content, obviously, most of it I put out on via my Twitter account, game highlights, stats, results, interviews, stuff like that. So we'll see where the weekend takes us. But it could be, it could be some good stuff in there. But until next time, thanks for being here. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you soon.